The December morning air was crisp and filled with anticipation as Catherine, Princess of Wales, stepped out of her car at Westminster Abbey. The historic stone walls of the ancient church stood majestically before her, their Gothic spires reaching toward the grey London sky like fingers of prayer. Today marked the 4th year of her beloved, together at Christmas carol service, but something felt different this time. The weight of the past year, the challenges she had faced, and the journey back to this moment made every breath feel more precious. Catherine paused for a moment, adjusting the striking red coat that wrapped around her like a warm embrace. The Alexander McQueen creation, with its dramatic black bow at the collar, had become one of her favorites over the years. She had worn it 3 times before, but today it felt like putting on armor made of hope and determination. The coat's deep crimson color seemed to capture the spirit of Christmas itself, vibrant and full of life against the ancient stone backdrop of Westminster Abbey. As she walked toward the great west door, Catherine could see the kindness tree that had been specially prepared for today's service. The bare branches reached out like welcoming arms, ready to receive the heartfelt messages that guests would hang upon them. This tree would become a symbol of everything the service represented: the connections between people, the support they offered each other, and the love that sustained them through difficult times. The sounds of preparation echoed from within the abbey. Choir members were warming up their voices, their harmonies drifting through the ancient halls like whispered prayers. The soft rustle of programs being arranged and chairs being positioned created a gentle symphony of anticipation. Catherine could hear the distant murmur of guests beginning to arrive. 1,600 people who had all shown extraordinary kindness and empathy to others in their communities throughout the year. Inside the abbey, the lighting crew was making final adjustments to ensure that every face would be beautifully illuminated for the television cameras that would capture this special evening. The Christmas decorations adorned every corner with tasteful elegance. Holly and ivy wound around ancient pillars. Candles flickered in brass holders that had witnessed centuries of worship, and red poinsettias added splashes of festive color to the sacred space. Catherine's mind wandered to the letter she had written for today's guests. In it, she had poured her heart out about the importance of love and empathy, especially during life's most challenging moments. She had written about finding space in busy lives to live with open hearts, about the Christmas spirit being fundamentally about kindness and forgiveness. These words felt more meaningful now than ever before, having emerged from her own journey through uncertainty and back to strength. The princess knew that many of the guests arriving today had their own stories of resilience. There were healthcare workers who had gone beyond their duties to comfort patients and families, teachers who had found creative ways to support students through difficult times, neighbors who had simply been there when someone needed them most, volunteers who had given their time without seeking recognition. Each person represented the very best of humanity, the light that shone brightest when darkness threatened to overwhelm. As Catherine stood there, taking in the magnitude of what this service represented, she felt a profound sense of gratitude for her own journey back to this moment, for the people who had supported her family through their challenges, and for the opportunity to celebrate the countless acts of kindness that happened every day in communities across the United Kingdom. This wasn't just a carol service, it was a celebration of the human spirit itself. The abbey doors stood open, welcoming all who would enter. Soon, familiar faces would walk through those doors: family members, fellow royals, celebrities, and extraordinary ordinary people who had made a difference in someone else's life. But for now, in this quiet moment before the celebration began, Catherine allowed herself to simply be present in this sacred space, surrounded by centuries of faith and hope, preparing to host an evening that would touch hearts and remind everyone watching that they were not alone in the world. The stone walls around her had witnessed royal weddings and coronations, state funerals and jubilee celebrations. They had stood through wars and peace, through times of great sorrow and immense joy. Today, they would witness something equally important: a celebration of the connections that bind people together, the love that sustains communities, and the hope that carries everyone forward into whatever tomorrow might bring. The first familiar faces began to arrive as the December afternoon light filtered through Westminster Abbey's magnificent stained glass windows. Catherine watched from inside the abbey as her parents, Carol and Michael Middleton, approached the entrance with their characteristic warm smiles. After all these years in the public eye, they still carried themselves with the same down-to-earth grace that had first charmed the royal family. Carol wore an elegant navy coat that complemented her husband's dark overcoat, and their presence brought Catherine a sense of comfort and grounding. Behind her parents came Pippa, Catherine's sister, looking radiant in a black tweed dress, accented with rich red velvet accessories that perfectly captured the festive spirit of the evening. Pippa had always been Catherine's closest confidant, the person who could make her laugh even during the most formal occasions. Today, seeing Pippa's familiar smile across the Abbey felt like receiving a warm hug from childhood itself. James Middleton, Catherine's brother, arrived with his wife Alize, both beaming with the happiness that seemed to follow them everywhere they went. James had traveled a long journey to find this contentment, and seeing him so genuinely joyful filled Catherine with pride and love. His presence reminded her that family meant everything, that the bonds between siblings could weather any storm and emerge even stronger. As the Middleton family settled into their seats, Catherine moved through the Abbey to greet the other guests who were beginning to fill the ancient pews. Each person she encountered had a story that had brought them to this moment. There was the nurse who had organized support groups for families dealing with illness, the teacher who had created a food bank for struggling students, the elderly gentleman who had started a befriending service for isolated neighbors. The celebrities and performers who would bring the service to life were also arriving, each adding their own special energy to the growing atmosphere of anticipation. Gregory Porter, the jazz musician known for his soulful voice and signature flat cap, was reviewing his music sheets one final time. His selection, "Do You Hear What I Hear?" had been chosen specifically for its message of spreading peace and understanding from person to person, heart to heart. Paloma Faith swept in wearing a stunning red dress that seemed to shimmer under the Abbey's lights. Her vibrant personality filled the space around her as she chatted with other guests, her distinctive voice carrying notes of excitement and warmth. She had spoken earlier about her 8-year-old daughter's amusing concern that singing for a princess might somehow involve medieval punishments, a story that had made Catherine laugh with genuine delight. Richard E. Grant, the beloved actor who would be reading from Charles Dickens's A Christmas Carol, was already in performance mode, his theatrical presence commanding attention even in casual conversation. He understood the power of Dickens' words to transform hearts, to remind people of their capacity for redemption and kindness. His reading would serve as a bridge between the literary traditions of Christmas past and the very real acts of compassion happening in the present. Michelle Dockery, known to millions as Lady Mary from Downton Abbey, carried herself with the same grace that had made her character so beloved, but tonight she would be sharing something much more personal. Her own reflections on empathy and kindness, thoughts drawn from her real-life experiences rather than any script. As more guests continued to arrive, the Abbey began to fill with a beautiful tapestry of humanity. There were young mothers who had organized community support groups, elderly volunteers who had devoted decades to helping others, teachers who had gone far beyond their job descriptions to nurture struggling students, healthcare workers who had provided comfort during the most difficult moments of people's lives. Catherine noticed a group of children from a local choir who would be participating in the service. Their excitement was infectious as they whispered to each other about singing in such a famous place. She remembered her own children's first experiences in Westminster Abbey, how Prince George had been wide-eyed with wonder, how Princess Charlotte had asked a dozen questions about the history of every stone and window, how Prince Louis had tried to count all the candles. The royal guests were also taking their places. Princess Beatrice and her husband, Edoardo Mapelli Mazzi, arrived with young Christopher, Eduardo's son from his previous relationship. Beatrice glowed with the special radiance of expectant motherhood, as she and Eduardo were expecting their second child together in the coming year. Their little family unit represented the beautiful complexity of modern families, bound together by love rather than just blood. Zara Tyndall, Prince William's cousin, brought her characteristic blend of royal dignity and approachable warmth. She had always been one of Catherine's favorite members of the extended royal family, someone who understood the balance between public duty and private authenticity. Sophie, Duchess of Edinburgh, looked elegant in winter white, her presence adding another layer of royal support for Catherine's important event. As the Abbey continued to fill, Catherine felt overwhelmed by the sense of community that was building within these ancient walls. This wasn't just a Christmas service, it was a gathering of people who had chosen to make the world a little brighter through their actions. Some had helped just one person, while others had touched hundreds of lives. But each act of kindness mattered equally in the grand tapestry of human compassion. The musicians were making their final preparations, the choir was assembling, and the television cameras were positioned to capture every meaningful moment. Soon, her own family would arrive, William and the children, completing the circle of love that would make this evening truly special. But for now, Catherine savored this moment of anticipation, surrounded by so many people who embodied the very best of the Christmas spirit. The moment Catherine had been waiting for arrived as the familiar sound of car doors closing echoed outside Westminster Abbey. Through the great windows, she could see William emerging from their vehicle, immediately followed by three small figures that made her heart skip with joy. Prince George, now 11 years old and growing taller every month, stepped out with the careful dignity he had learned to carry in public spaces. Princess Charlotte, 9 and radiantly confident, practically bounced with excitement as she took in the grandeur of the abbey decorated for Christmas. And Prince Louis, 6 years old and still wonderfully unpredictable, looked around with wide eyes before pulling one of his trademark funny faces that would undoubtedly delight the photographers. The family coordinated beautifully in their festive attire. William looked distinguished in his navy suit, a color that brought out his eyes and conveyed both formality and warmth. Prince George wore a matching navy suit that made him look remarkably grown up, while Princess Charlotte was stunning in a navy dress that perfectly complemented her father's and brother's outfits. Prince Louis, true to his spirited nature, wore his navy suit with a slightly mischievous expression that suggested he had big plans for making this evening memorable. As they approached the kindness tree outside the abbey, the family paused for one of the most meaningful traditions of the evening. Each member of the royal family had prepared a message to hang on the tree's branches, dedicating their words to someone who had supported them through life's challenges. Catherine watched as George carefully hung his message, his young face serious with the weight of the moment. Charlotte followed suit, her natural grace evident even in this simple act. Louis, with his characteristic enthusiasm, needed a gentle reminder to hang his message gently, rather than launching it at the branches like a game. William's message carried special significance this year. The past 12 months had tested their family in ways they never could have anticipated, and his gratitude for the people who had surrounded them with love and support ran deeper than words could express. As he hung his own message on the tree, his eyes met Catherine's across the gathering crowd, and in that moment, 1,000 conversations passed between them without a single word being spoken. The family's entrance into Westminster Abbey was met with thunderous applause from the 1,600 guests who had already taken their seats. The sound echoed off the ancient stone walls and soared up toward the vaulted ceiling, creating a symphony of appreciation and welcome that seemed to embrace the royal family like a warm blanket. Catherine felt tears prick at her eyes as she realized how many people had gathered to celebrate not just Christmas, but the power of human kindness itself. As they made their way down the aisle, Catherine noticed how naturally her children interacted with the assembled guests. George had learned to acknowledge people with polite nods and gentle smiles, carrying himself with a maturity that sometimes surprised even his parents. Charlotte was in her element, her natural charm and confidence shining as she waved to children in the congregation who were clearly excited to see her. Louis, predictably, provided the evening's first moment of delightful spontaneity by giving an enthusiastic wave to a group of young choir members who giggled with delight at his attention. The sight of her family together in this sacred space filled Catherine with profound emotion. Westminster Abbey held such special meaning for them. It was where she and William had been married on that magical April day in 2011, where they had begun their journey as husband and wife before the eyes of the world. Now, more than a decade later, they were returning not as newlyweds full of hopes and dreams, but as a family that had weathered storms and emerged stronger, more connected, and more grateful for each day they had together. The Abbey's Christmas decorations seemed to glow more brightly as the royal family took their seats. Garlands of holly and ivy adorned every pillar, their deep green leaves punctuated by bright red berries that caught the candlelight. Towering Christmas trees stood at strategic points throughout the nave, each one decorated with simple white lights that twinkled like stars. Red poinsettias added splashes of vibrant color to every corner, their velvety petals creating a warm contrast to the gray stone walls. Catherine looked around at all the familiar faces now assembled in this holy space. Her parents sat with expressions of pride and love that reminded her of every important moment in her life when they had been there to support her. Pippa and James represented the unbreakable bonds of sibling love that had sustained her through childhood and continued to ground her in adulthood. The extended royal family members present showed the broader network of support and duty that came with their position. But it was the presence of William and their 3 children that made this moment truly complete. After months of uncertainty, treatments, and careful steps back into public life, sitting together as a family in this place of worship felt like a victory in itself. Not a victory over any particular challenge, but a victory of love over fear, of hope over despair, of togetherness over isolation. The choir began their warm-up exercises, their voices creating harmonies that seemed to rise naturally from the stone floor and dance among the rafters. The sound was both earthly and ethereal, a reminder that music had the power to transport hearts and minds to places beyond everyday concerns. Tonight, these voices would carry messages of love, hope, and celebration to everyone present and to the millions who would watch the service on television. As the final preparations were made around them, Catherine felt a deep sense of completion settling over her. This service represented everything she had hoped to achieve when she first conceived of the Together at Christmas tradition. It was about bringing people together, celebrating those who made their communities better, and reminding everyone that the simple acts of love and kindness that happened every day were the true miracles of the Christmas season. As the service officially began, Westminster Abbey was transformed into something magical. The choir's opening hymn, "Once in Royal David's City," filled every corner of the ancient space with ethereal beauty. Catherine closed her eyes for a moment and let the familiar melody wash over her, remembering all the Christmas services of her childhood, the excitement of the season, and the simple faith that had always anchored her family's celebrations. The Very Reverend Dr. David Hoyle stepped forward to welcome the congregation, his voice carrying easily through the Abbey's remarkable acoustics. His opening prayer spoke of piercing darkness with light, of bringing peace to a troubled world, and of filling hearts with heavenly joy. These words felt particularly meaningful this year, resonating with everyone who had faced their own darkness and found their way back to light. When Gregory Porter rose to perform "Do You Hear What I Hear?", the entire Abbey seemed to hold its breath. His distinctive voice, rich and warm like aged whiskey, carried the song's message about spreading peace from person to person, heart to heart. Catherine watched her children listening intently. Prince Louis swaying slightly to the rhythm, while Prince George and Princess Charlotte sat with the careful attention they had learned to bring to formal occasions. The song's lyrics about a star bringing light to the world took on special significance in this setting. Catherine thought about all the people in the congregation who had been stars in their own communities, not seeking fame or recognition, but simply offering their light to others who needed it. The nurse who had stayed late to comfort a frightened patient, the teacher who had noticed a quiet child needed extra attention, the neighbor who had checked on an elderly resident during a difficult winter. Michelle Dockery's reading of her personal reflections on empathy and kindness brought a different energy to the service. Her words were deeply personal, yet universally relatable, speaking about the moments when we choose to see beyond ourselves and truly connect with another person's experience. Catherine appreciated how Michelle's contribution bridged the worlds of entertainment and real-life compassion, showing that kindness was not confined to any particular profession or background. The choir's performance of "In the Stillness" created a moment of profound quiet in the bustling heart of London. Outside these walls, the city continued its relentless pace, but inside the Abbey, time seemed suspended in a bubble of peace and reflection. Catherine noticed how even the youngest children in the congregation seemed to sense the sacred nature of this moment, their usual fidgeting replaced by an almost mystical stillness. When Richard E. Grant approached the lectern to read from Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol, his theatrical training was evident in every gesture and inflection. But this wasn't a performance. It was a sharing of one of literature's most powerful messages about redemption and the possibility of change. His selection focused on Scrooge's transformation, reminding everyone present that it was never too late to choose kindness over selfishness, connection over isolation. The reading resonated particularly strongly with Catherine, who had experienced her own transformation over the past year. Not from selfishness to kindness, she had always been devoted to service, but from taking each day for granted to treasuring every moment of health, family, and purpose. Dickens' words about the spirit of Christmas living within our hearts year-round felt like a personal message about carrying forward the lessons learned during difficult times. Paloma Faith's performance of This Christmas brought a different kind of magic to the service. Her powerful voice, full of soul and emotion, transformed the classic song into something both celebratory and deeply moving. Catherine found herself thinking about all the Christmases her family had shared together, and all the ones that lay ahead. Each one a gift to be unwrapped with gratitude and joy. The participation of students from the Royal Ballet School added an element of graceful beauty that seemed to make the very air in the Abbey dance. Their movements, perfectly synchronized with John Rutter's Colors of Christmas, painted pictures of celebration and joy that words alone could not convey. Catherine watched Princess Charlotte watching the dancers, her eyes bright with the wonder that came from seeing artistry in motion. Sophie Okonedo's reading of The Kindness of Trees by Jackie Kay, accompanied by original piano music, brought the service back to themes of interconnection and mutual support. The metaphor of trees caring for each other through their root systems resonated deeply with the evening's central message: that people, like trees, were stronger when they were connected to each other, when they shared resources and support. Adam Peaty, the Olympic swimmer who had overcome his own challenges to achieve greatness in the pool, read the second lesson from Luke's Gospel. His reading of the Nativity story brought fresh energy to familiar words, reminding everyone that the Christmas message was ultimately about hope, arriving in unexpected places and forms. His presence also represented the theme of perseverance and triumph over adversity that ran through so many of the stories represented in the congregation. As Olivia Dean's crystalline voice filled the Abbey with The Christmas Song, Catherine felt a profound sense of completion beginning to settle over the service. Each element had built upon the last, creating a tapestry of music, words, and meaning that captured the very essence of what Christmas could be when celebrated with intentional gratitude and love. The television cameras captured every moment, but Catherine knew that the real power of this service wasn't in its production value or celebrity participants. It was in the faces of the people in the congregation. The quiet heroes who had made their communities better. The families who had supported each other through difficult times, the individuals who had chosen love over fear, in countless small but significant ways. Looking around at her own family, Catherine felt overwhelmed with gratitude. William sat with the same expression of quiet pride and love that he had worn at their wedding in this same space. George was growing into a young man who understood both privilege and responsibility. Charlotte radiated confidence and joy that promised great things for her future. And Louis remained wonderfully, authentically himself, a reminder that joy and spontaneity were just as important as dignity and duty. The service was building toward its crescendo, but Catherine already knew that this evening had achieved everything she had hoped for and more. As the final notes of the closing hymn faded into the ancient stones of Westminster Abbey, Catherine felt a profound sense of completion washing over her. The service had been everything she had dreamed it could be. A perfect celebration of love, kindness, and the connections that bind communities together. The 1,600 guests began to stir in their seats, but nobody seemed eager to break the spell that had been woven through music, readings, and shared purpose. The applause that erupted was different from the polite appreciation typically heard at royal events. This was heartfelt, emotional, and sustained. A standing ovation from people who had been genuinely moved by what they had experienced together. Catherine rose with her family, acknowledging the appreciation, while simultaneously trying to deflect attention to the real stars of the evening, the volunteers, caregivers, teachers, and everyday heroes who filled the Abbey's pews. Prince Louis, true to form, provided one last moment of delightful spontaneity by clapping with such enthusiasm that his whole body seemed to bounce with the rhythm. His uninhibited joy perfectly captured the spirit of the evening, authentic, unguarded, and full of pure happiness. Princess Charlotte giggled at her younger brother's exuberance, while maintaining her own composed applause, and Prince George smiled with the kind of genuine warmth that showed he had truly understood the significance of what they had all shared. As the congregation began to slowly make their way toward the exits, Catherine took a moment to look around the abbey one more time. The Christmas decorations that had seemed beautiful before now appeared almost magical in the soft glow of candlelight and the warm atmosphere created by so many people celebrating together. The kindness tree outside would continue to display its messages of gratitude and love, a lasting symbol of everything this service represented. The performers and readers gathered around Catherine and her family, their faces glowing with the satisfaction of having contributed something meaningful to the evening. Gregory Porter spoke about how moved he had been by the stories he had heard from other guests, while Paloma Faith laughed about her daughter's relief that no one had been beheaded during the proceedings. Richard E. Grant, ever the storyteller, was already weaving the evening's events into narratives that would entertain friends and family for years to come. Catherine made sure to personally thank each performer, understanding that their participation had elevated the service from a nice community gathering to something truly special. These were busy people, with full schedules and numerous demands on their time. Yet they had chosen to be here, to lend their talents to celebrating the quiet heroes who rarely received recognition for their daily acts of kindness. The reunion with extended family and friends continued, as everyone slowly made their way out of the abbey. Conversations buzzed with excitement about favorite moments from the service, favorite songs, and favorite readings. Children who had participated in the choir were practically vibrating with pride at having performed in such a famous venue, while their parents basked in the glow of seeing their young ones be part of something so meaningful. Carol and Michael Middleton approached their daughter with the same proud expressions they had worn at every important milestone in her life. Their presence grounded Catherine in memories of family Christmases growing up, of simple celebrations focused on being together rather than elaborate productions. Those foundational experiences had shaped her understanding of what truly mattered during the holiday season. Pippa and James, along with their respective spouses, formed a little cluster of Middleton family warmth that reminded Catherine of all the support that had carried her through the past year's challenges. Family had always been her anchor, but recent experiences had deepened her appreciation for the irreplaceable value of people who loved you unconditionally and stood by you through everything. The royal guests, Princess Beatrice, Zara Tyndall, Sophie Duchess of Edinburgh, and others, represented another kind of family, bound together by shared understanding of public service and the unique challenges that came with their positions. Their presence at the service showed unity and mutual support that strengthened the entire institution they all served. As they finally stepped out into the London evening, Catherine was struck by how different the world looked compared to when she had arrived earlier that afternoon. The same streets, the same buildings, the same December air. But something fundamental had shifted. The service had created a sense of connection and possibility that seemed to extend beyond the abbey's walls into the city itself. The family's car was waiting, but Catherine wasn't quite ready to leave this magical evening behind. She paused to look back at Westminster Abbey, its illuminated spires reaching toward the star-filled sky above London. This ancient building had witnessed so much history, had sheltered so many hopes and prayers, and tonight it had hosted something that felt like a small but significant contribution to making the world a little brighter. William placed a gentle hand on her back, understanding her need for one last moment of reflection. Their children clustered around them, tired but happy, their faces still glowing with the excitement of the evening. George was already talking about next year's service, while Charlotte wanted to know if she could write a thank you note to all the performers. Louis, growing sleepy now, leaned against his mother and asked if they could sing Christmas songs in the car on the way home. The ride back through London was peaceful, the family settling into comfortable quiet as the adrenaline of the evening began to ebb. Catherine looked out at the Christmas lights decorating the city's streets and felt a deep sense of satisfaction. The Together at Christmas service had accomplished exactly what she had hoped when she first conceived of this tradition. It had brought people together, celebrated those who made their communities better, and reminded everyone present that love and kindness were the most powerful forces for creating positive change in the world. Most importantly, it had shown that even after the most challenging of years, there was still reason to celebrate, still cause for hope, and still countless opportunities to choose connection over isolation, love over fear. The service would be broadcast on Christmas Eve, carrying its message of empathy and kindness into homes across the United Kingdom and beyond. But for Catherine, the real victory was in this moment, surrounded by family, filled with gratitude, and looking forward to whatever tomorrow might bring, with renewed faith in the fundamental goodness of people when they came together in the spirit of Christmas.